Welcome to the Preschool Transitional Kindergarten Learning Foundations, or PTKLF presentation of the English Language Development subdomain. My name is Olivia Damaris, and I am a Child Development Consultant at the California Department of Education. This pre-recorded presentation is part of the series of presentations developed by the California Department of Education in partnership with WestEd that follows the release of the PTKLF. The purpose of these presentations is to provide a snapshot of each domain covered in the publication. Today's presentation is focused on the English Language Development subdomain. This subdomain can be found in the Language and Literacy Development domain, and today we are joined by the writers of this domain, Anne-Marie Weiss, Rosalie Odeen, and Amy Woodbridge. For an overview of the introduction of the PTKLF publication, including its structure, organizations, and major revisions, please visit our prior pre-recorded presentation titled PTKLF Introductions. Additionally, please watch the Foundational Language Development subdomain prior to this presentation. The agenda for today is as follows. We will first provide acknowledgments for the contributions of this specific domain, then provide an overview of the organization of this subdomain, and next provide examples of foundations in each strand, including one for listening and speaking, foundational literacy skills, reading, and writing. Then we will provide an overview on how educators can support English language development. We will end with a closing and look at future pre-recorded presentations. We want to take a moment to list some acknowledgments for individuals who contributed significant time to the development of this subdomain. In addition to the California Department of Education and WestEd team, we had our WestEd lead writers, Rosalie Odeen, Amy Woodbridge, and Anne-Marie Weiss. We also consulted with subject matter experts, Linda Espinoza from University of Missouri, Lulu Song from Brooklyn College of the City University of New York, Shi Chen from the University of Toronto, and Yuko Uchikoshi from UC Davis. We also had specific reviewers who brought the lens of inclusion, cultural diversity, or multilingual learners. Julie Washington from UC Irvine, Margaret Gillis from SRI, Mary McLean from the University of Florida, Marlene Zepeda from Cal State LA, and Dina Castro from Boston University. For this domain in particular, we also had several contributors who provided examples of child speech in different languages, as well as reviewers who provided authentic examples from various cultural backgrounds. We would also like to thank our many educators and interest holders who participated in focus groups and provided feedback. We will now pass it on to the WestEd lead writers to talk through the details of this domain.
Thank you. I will first start with the overall definition, structure, and organization of this subdomain. This subdomain is part of the larger domain of language and literacy development, which includes foundational language development and English language development. As a reminder from the presentation on foundational language development, that subdomain focuses on a child's home language, whether that be English or a different language. The subdomain we are talking about today only focuses on English language development when a child is learning English as a second or additional language. We'll start with a definition of the English language development subdomain. This subdomain of language and literacy development describes the English language development of children 3 to 5.5 years of age who are learning English as an additional language. The English language development subdomain may be used for children learning English in dual language programs, as well as early education programs in which English is the primary language of instruction. It is intended for use together with the foundational language development subdomain. An important note is that while the English language development subdomain foundations represent children's growing knowledge and skills in English, they are designed to recognize and encourage children's continued use and development of their home languages. Learning English does not and should not replace children's home language development. In addition, it is natural and helpful for both children and adults to draw on all of their language resources to communicate. As children develop their multilingual capacities, they learn to use these vast language resources to communicate effectively in different contexts with different people. The examples in the English language development subdomain illustrate how children use both their home languages and English to communicate. The organization of the English language development subdomain is nearly identical to that of the foundational language development subdomain. This makes the development of a home language and English easier to compare across the two subdomains. The organization includes Strand 1, listening and speaking, which includes the substrands vocabulary, grammar, and language use. Strand 2, foundational literacy skills, which includes the substrands phonological awareness, alphabetics in print, and concepts about print. Strand 3, reading, which includes the substrands literacy, interest, and response, and comprehension and analysis of age-appropriate text. And Strand 4, writing, which includes one substrand, writing as communication. Please note that the writing strand has only one substrand. The English language development subdomain does not address fine motor skills needed for writing, as these skills are skills that are not specific to English. The foundation language development subdomain addresses the fine motor skills children develop as part of their path to writing. Before we dive into providing examples of foundation within each strand, we want to make a general note about some high-level changes you will see from the prior version of the Preschool Learning Foundations in the domain of English language development. The revised foundations take an inclusive approach to language development, which highlights the role of home language development throughout English language development. One way the foundations are more inclusive is through the new structure, where ELD is one of two subdomains of language and literacy development. This structure centers the child as a language learner. Examples throughout the ELD subdomain include 11 languages, including American Sign Language, to represent the diversity of languages spoken by California's children and families. The foundations highlight how home language influences English language learning, including specific home language strengths children draw on while learning English. The foundations include a new strand, foundational literacy skills, which addresses skills that contribute to later reading and writing development. In ELD, the foundations show how children learn to understand the sounds of English and how sounds are combined into English words. As we consider the ELD levels, it is important to keep in mind that multilingual learners who are learning English as an additional language may enter an early education program with varying amounts of experience with English. It is also important to remember that there is no uniform pathway or predetermined rate for learning English as a second or additional language. Children will also use knowledge from their home language and apply these concepts to support their learning in English. Children enter early education programs with their current knowledge of vocabulary, grammar, and conversational norms in their home languages and cultures. But the extent to which their knowledge applies directly to English may vary by language. The English language development subdomain has 3 levels to account for differences in individual children's ability to use English to communicate. These levels are discovering, developing, and broadening. Foundations at the discovering level describe skills and knowledge children demonstrate as they engage with English for the first time in the first days, weeks, and possibly months in an early education program. Children increasingly recognize English speech and print, understand and use a few words, and interact with English language books and literacy activities. Foundations at the developing level describe children's abilities to interact more skillfully and knowledgeably in English. Children understand and express an increasing variety of ideas, wants, and observations while applying some rules of grammar. They demonstrate a growing understanding of English print, conventions, and the alphabet, comprehend some information from books that are read to them, and experiment with writing using the English alphabet. Foundations at the broadening level generally represent skills and knowledge of children who are able to engage in most everyday interactions in English. Children at this level can use English across a range of contexts and interactions, both in spoken language and in print-based literacy activities. A child may also be at different levels of English language development for different skills. For example, their listening and speaking skills may be at the developing or broadening levels, while some literacy skills in English may be new and therefore correspond to the discovering level. The ELD levels are not age-based. Some of the skills and knowledge described at the developing and broadening levels may not be developmentally appropriate for younger children. Since the ELD foundations cover development from 3 to 5.5 years of age, it is important to refer to the foundational language development subdomain to determine what might be developmentally appropriate for the child's age. This is an example of how the foundations are structured. Each foundation is numbered, with the first number representing the strand and the second representing the order of the foundations within that strand. The foundation on screen is from Strand 2.0, Foundational Literacy Skills, and is the 6th foundation in this strand. So the foundation is 2.6. Next, 3 foundation statements appear underneath this label. To capture this continuum, the 3 levels are labeled Discovering, Developing, and Broadening to represent children's changing English language knowledge, with Discovering in the left-hand column, Developing in the middle column, and Broadening in the right-hand column. Below the foundation statements are a series of examples, only one of which is listed here to demonstrate. The first 1 or 2 examples for each foundation are aligned across the 3 levels to demonstrate the developmental progression in the same context.
Now we will present some samples within each strand. The first strand is listening and speaking, which focuses on the development of spoken English. It addresses how children develop vocabulary and grammar, as well as their knowledge of how to use English to interact with others, communicate in meaningful ways, and learn about the world around them. In the following slides, I will present a sample foundation from the vocabulary substrand, Foundation 1.2, on using words. I will talk through the 3 different levels, discovering, developing, and then broadening, which are displayed here from left to right. Each level will be covered on a separate slide. This first sample comes from the vocabulary substrand, Foundation 1.2, which is focused on using words. At the discovering level, children use English words, mostly consisting of concrete nouns. For example, a child at this level might mouth tar silently to themselves after peers in chorus say star when a teacher points to a picture of a star and asks, "What's this?" At the developing level, children use varied English words, including an increasing number of concrete nouns and some verbs and pronouns. A child at this level might say star when their teacher points to a picture of a star and asks, "What's this?" At the broadening level, children use a wide variety of English words to share knowledge of concepts, including words across all parts of speech, with some inaccuracies. A child at this level might say twinkle star when a teacher points to a star and asks, "What's this?" You can see the progression goes from using a few English words to being able to use a wider variety, but still with some inaccuracies. The second strand in English language development is foundational literacy skills, which addresses skills that contribute to children's future reading and writing development in English. These skills include phonological awareness, knowledge of alphabetics and print, and an understanding of the concept of print in English. This sample comes from the phonological awareness substrand. The foundation is focused on recognizing and segmenting sounds in English. Again, I'll talk through the 3 levels one by one, presented here from left to right. At the discovering level, children are able to recognize and produce sounds of spoken English. For example, as a teacher points to objects in a book and names them in English, a child is able to repeat these words in English, like snake and leaf. At the developing level, children are able to match English words that have the same first sound in speech with adult support or the support of pictures or objects. For example, while experiencing a picture book with a teacher, a child points to the picture of a snake and says, "It's a snake." The teacher then responds, "Snake, snake. Can you find something else that starts with the same sound as snake?" After looking, the child does not answer. The teacher then continues, "I see a branch, a leaf, and a snail. Which one has the same sound as snake?" The child then points to the snail. In the broadening level, children are able to isolate and pronounce the first sound of a word in English with adult support or the support of pictures or objects. For example, while looking at a picture book with a teacher, a child points to a picture of a snake and communicates it's a snake. When the teacher repeats snake and asks, "What sound does snake start with?" the child responds, "S." You can see the progression goes from recognition of some English sounds to being able to isolate and produce first sounds of a word in English. It's important to refer to the foundational language development subdomain in order to determine what skills are developmentally appropriate for children. Some ELD foundations at the broadening level, including this one, align with the later foundation in foundational language development and represent skills we would only expect to see develop in older preschoolers or children in transitional kindergarten. The third strand is reading, which focuses on children's interest in and engagement with literacy activities in English, as well as their understanding of stories and informational texts that are read to them in English. This sample comes from the Literacy Interest and Response substrand. Foundation 3.2 focuses on participating in read aloud activities. In the next slides, I'll talk through each level presented here from left to right. At the discovering level, children pay attention to an adult reading a short English language book. For example, a child might pay attention while a teacher reads an English language picture book about gardens. In the developing level, children engage in read aloud activities with English language books when the language is predictable or repetitive and communicate about the content of the books. For example, a child might count 1, 2, 3, 4 together with other children when the teacher invites the group to count the number of strawberries in a picture in an English language book about gardens. Then, in the broadening level, children engage in read aloud activities with English language books and communicate about the content of the books. For example, while the teacher reads an English language book about gardens, a child might say, "There's a garden in my neighborhood. It doesn't have strawberries, it has peppers growing." You can see the progression goes from at first engaging or paying attention to English read aloud activities to more actively participating. Across all the levels, children may communicate about books using English, their home language, or gestures or other nonverbal responses. The last strand is writing, which focuses on children's beginning abilities to communicate ideas through English writing. This sample comes from the Writing as Communication substrand. Foundation 4.1 focuses on writing to represent words or ideas. In the next slides, I'll talk through each level, presented here from left to right. At the discovering level, a child may write scribbles to represent words and ideas in English. For example, a child may make small controlled scribbles. And when a teacher asks, "What did you write?" the child communicates "Happy birthday" while tracking what they wrote with their finger. Then, in the developing level, a child may write letter-like scribbles to represent words and ideas in English with adult support. For example, a child may ask a teacher for help writing "Happy birthday." The teacher writes out "Happy birthday" on a piece of paper, saying each letter one by one and demonstrating how to form each letter. As the teacher demonstrates each letter, the child attempts to mimic the teacher's motions, producing lines that resemble letters but are not as clearly recognizable, such as writing 2 vertical lines for the letter H. Then in the broadening level, a child may write a few recognizable letters to represent words and ideas in English independently. For example, a child may ask a teacher for help writing "Happy birthday." The teacher writes out "Happy birthday" on a piece of paper, saying each letter one by one. The child slowly prints each letter as the teacher says the letter, writing some of the letters backward or illegibly. You can see the progression goes from a child wanting to write an English phrase like "Happy birthday," but making scribbles, to then more intentionally trying to write "Happy birthday" by asking the teacher for help with the letters, although most of the letters will still be represented as letter-like scribbles, to then being able to write more recognizable letters to communicate an English word or phrase. Again, it's important to refer to the foundational language development subdomain in order to determine what skills are developmentally appropriate for children. Some ELD foundations at the broadening level, including this one, align with the later foundation in foundational language development and represent skills we would only expect to see develop in older preschoolers or children in transitional kindergarten. It's also important to highlight how the PTKLF in language and literacy development addresses multilingualism as a strength, language varieties as linguistic assets, elevating families and communities' language and literacy practices, and inclusive approaches to support children with disabilities. These areas are highlighted in detail in a prior presentation, and we encourage you to watch the PTKLF Language and Literacy Foundational Language Development pre-recorded presentation on the YouTube channel.
In this section, we will highlight some high-level practices to consider when supporting children's English language development. We will also touch on how to support English language development depending on children's home languages and previous experiences with written language. As a note, these slides cover only some of the instructional strategies featured in the publication. To support children's vocabulary growth and development in English, educators can make sure they understand the language around regular classroom routines, offering support as needed to help children move through their day. For example, educators might use visual schedules to help children track the order of routines. This is especially important when children first start learning English. It is also important to speak at a usual pace, but speak clearly and repeat important words when needed. For example, when guiding children through a hand washing routine, educators can give the instructions in short, clear steps, using the words water and soap in each step, and supporting the children's understanding by gesturing to the water and soap each time. To help children with planned activities like book reading, educators can introduce key English vocabulary to help the children to follow the activity. Vocabulary can be introduced using gestures, showing real objects or drawing pictures. For example, before reading a book about the life cycle of a flower, an educator can make picture cards for seed, sun, rain, bud, and flower, and briefly introduce each word. Educators can draw on a number of practices to promote rich English language use. Children learn from having opportunities to experience and use rich and varied language. Children learn English vocabulary and grammar from hearing stories in English, participating in extended conversations, listening to peers and adults, and having opportunities to share their thoughts and ideas in English that go beyond communicating needs or following simple directions. Educators can support children's grammatical development by repeating and expanding on what children say, using grammatically complete sentences without directly correcting the child. For example, if a child communicates wanted, an educator might reply, "You want some more juice?" During group activities, children can support each other's language use. Educators can pair children who are learning English with peers who are proficient in English. For example, in an activity where children are doing a scavenger hunt in pairs, educators can have children who have different levels of English proficiency work together. Educators can promote English language use while encouraging children to continue to use their home language in the care setting by offering opportunities to work with other speakers of their home language, inviting family and community members to share stories in the children's home languages, and sharing print materials that reflect the languages spoken by all the children in the class. To support children's phonological awareness, educators should keep in mind that languages have different sounds. For example, some languages do not have distinct and sounds, so words with these sounds will need to be said clearly and pointed out to children so they can practice recognizing and making those sounds. Children may also need extra practice using sound combinations that do not exist in their home language. For example, not all languages use sounds that blend consonants together, such as sm in smell or sts at the end of forests. Also, some languages do not have any words that end in a consonant sound. A child whose home language follows these rules and does not have consonant blends may initially pronounce the word snack as sanaku because they are applying the sound rules from their home language. To support children learning sounds and sound combinations in English, pronounce words clearly and give children authentic learning experiences with time to practice new sounds or provide opportunities for them to practice new words in the context of meaningful interactions. And if you are unsure about the language conventions of some of the home languages of your children, partner with families or staff who may speak the child's language to learn more about how the language is spoken. Educators can also support children's knowledge of alphabetics and print in English by pointing out similarities and differences in how their home language and English are written. For example, an educator might explain that the letter J makes a H sound in Spanish, but a J sound in English. For languages that use a writing system that looks different from English, educators can highlight that writing in both languages conveys meaning and can share written text in English or in English and the child's home language. Children also learn how English is read by watching adults read. When reading aloud, model English reading by slowly underlining a word or block of text using a finger, moving from left to right. Invite children to help turn the pages in the appropriate direction, providing explicit instruction when needed. Playing games using the alphabet can also support all children's alphabet knowledge. For example, educators can write letters in sidewalk chalk outside, then ask children to move to the appropriate letter corresponding to a sound, such as jump to the letter that sounds like g, g, g. There are many practices to support children's comprehension of reading in English. When children are first learning English, select books that contain pictures to support children's understanding. Physical objects that reflect the themes in the book can also help children understand the book and learn vocabulary. For example, an educator might select toys to represent the animals in a picture book, introducing their names before the story and holding them up as they appear in the story. Educators can ask children questions about the books they have read together. When children are first beginning to use English, ask questions that focus on vocabulary the children already know. For example, who, where, and what questions are often some of the first question structures children learn. And asking questions in this way supports engagement and offers opportunities to practice speaking in English. For children who are just beginning to learn English and may not yet be expressing their reactions, opinions, or explanations in English, offer other ways to engage. Allow children to demonstrate their understanding of a book in ways that do not require speaking English, like drawing, acting out parts of the story, or talking about the story in their home language to another speaker of that language. All children need educator support to learn to write. While some children may already have knowledge of writing in their home language or experience with print, for many children, their early education program is their first experience with writing. For children whose home language is written using an alphabet similar to English, like Spanish or Tagalog, educators can support children to recognize the similarities and differences in how the languages are written. To support children whose home language uses a different writing system from English, like Arabic or Chinese, spend time showing how the letters are formed. Educators can provide children with authentic opportunities to express themselves through English writing, such as by contributing to a class book or writing a card to appear in English. Writing activities include dictating their thoughts to an adult or using scribbles that resemble letters, as well as beginning to write recognizable letters. Whether a child is learning to write at home or is learning writing in the care setting, creating a print-rich environment in the home languages of children and English supports writing development. Children may want to and should be encouraged to write their name in their home language or explore writing in their home language. As with the other skills described over the last few slides, it is important to support children in their home language as they learn English.
That concludes today's pre-recorded presentation. For a more detailed view of the English language development subdomain, please read the full document published on the CDE's website. Future pre-recorded presentations will also be published on the CDE website and released as they are available. To visit the website, please go to https://www.cde.ca.gov/sp/responsions.asp. Thank you.